What's up, everybody? It's Troy Cartwright. Welcome back to another episode of 10-Year Town, episode 80. I can't believe it. Before we get started, I had somebody reach out this week, and they asked me for some recommendations on some books for songwriting. And I wrote them out a little list, and I think a lot of people would get some value from this. So later this week, I will be sending out that list to all the members of the 10-Year Town community, which you can join for free at 10yeartown.com. We appreciate you. Thanks. Today's guest is songwriter Deric Ruttan. You know Deric from songs like Was I Thinkin, recorded by Dierks Bentley, Mine Would Be You, recorded by Shelton, Ask Any Ol Barstool, recorded by Jason Aldean, and many, many other hit songs. As an artist, he has also released several albums of his own, earning JUNO and Canadian Country Music Award nominations. I really enjoyed this conversation with Deric. I know you guys are going to love it. So without further ado, here he is, Deric Ruttan.
Here we are.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
I'm honored.
Well, thank you.
This is exciting.
You remembered we wrote one time, right?
Yep.
Okay.
March of 21.
That's right, on Zoom.
Yeah.
With Togs.
And see,
Salter.
this is like one of the great tragedies, I think, of which there are many of that era. But writing with people over Zoom was one of the weirdest things about it is that I will still meet people that I like. Some of them I Zoomed with like several times and didn't realize that they were like 6 foot 5 inches tall. So when I meet them, I'm like I'm not connecting the dots.
That happened to me specifically with Matt Stell, where we wrote twice on Zoom, and he just looked like a normal human. And then I met him in real life. I'm like, holy cow,
He's a giant.
It's like a hairless Chewbacca walking towards you. I mean,
yeah.
Wait, we're not going to have that, right?
No. We'll cut that out.
Oh, we can. I don't care. It's actually a good line.
Yeah, it is good. I know he's so tall.
Yeah, Matt McKinney too. Do you know Matt?
I think so.
Yeah. Matt's another one that I wrote several on Zoom with, and yeah, he's a very tall man.
Yeah. It was an interesting time, the Zoom days. And like we like stopped doing it and then like had to go back at some point. If I remember, like I feel like the whole year of 21 was like, are we doing this or not? Yeah. You know, it was very I'm a hardcore recluse. Okay.
So I mean, I'm overstating that probably, but I didn't mind it at all, and I took to Zoom like a fish to water, as they say.
There you go.
And I actually went like 420 some odd days between in-person co-writes.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, and it was a little weird. Re-entry was not without its challenges.
Yeah, what got you back in the room?
Basically, my publisher said, people are kind of moving away from this. Yeah. And we know you like it out there on your porch in Gallatin, but you might want to consider driving back to Music Row.
Yeah.
And so I did.
The consider was had great. Some meaning behind it.
Yeah. And I remember I was writing with Alex Klein and Hannah,
Gray Ellis?
Yes. Hannah Ellis, yeah. And it was at Alex's house over there, and Hannah came in with a big old hug, and I was like, ooh, this is weird. I haven't, other than my wife, I haven't hugged another human in over a year, so.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but it was, it all worked out.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I always start this thing off with the same question, and I'm really excited to talk to you today, and I knew your story is so unique, but I always start this thing off with the same question, which is how long have you been in town?
I have been in town 30 years.
Where from?
Which is crazy to say that out loud. But I moved here from Bracebridge, Ontario, Canada.
Okay.
And I actually just listened to the Travis Wood episode that you did. And,
Yeah.
And so I'm from about an hour from where Travis is from in Ontario.
Did you also get what do they call it, an extraordinary ability visa?
I did actually. I did get that visa initially. I got several different types of visas
along the way.
I kind of cobbled together things that were barely legal. Eventually got to the O1 visa, which is the one he was referencing, which is for entertainers and athletes, musicians.
Gotcha.
And then I got a green card, and now I have citizenship. So it was a multi-step process over many years.
Yes, I'm sure it was not without its pain points.
It was definitely not without its challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always certainly something I take for granted. I've talked with a couple people on here, and like going to college, I just had a few friends that were navigating that. It's a maze.
Yeah,
it's bureaucracy.
It is.
It's never fun.
It's never fun, and it can be very expensive, and a lot of it is just like, why are we even doing this? But
here
we did
we
it.
are.
Here we are.
Yeah. So when you moved here, I'm guessing you moved for music. Did you know anybody, or did you just sort of roll blindly into it?
Man, I wouldn't say I rolled blindly into it, but I had been to for college, I'd gone to a college in Canada, in London, Ontario, Fanshawe College, and it offered a course called Music Industry Arts.
Okay.
And that was a one-of-its-kind course that was offered in Canada at a public school anyway. There were other private colleges where you could get the same kind of deal, but I went to that, and it was a 2-year program, and so I kind of had a good, I think, music business basis as far as what does an A&R person do, what does a publisher do, what is all those jobs. And so I felt like that gave me a good kind of bedrock upon which to learn. But yeah, I after college I played in bands in Ontario mostly, but some in Eastern Canada and the Maritimes, a little bit down in America, but mostly Ontario. And I was laughably the lead guitarist in both of those bands, which is funny now to say out loud as well, because I'm not a lead guitar player. But I have a good enough ear, and I'm good enough on guitar where I could kind of memorize different licks and play the lick for whatever.
Gotcha.
But ask me to improvise, no, I can't do it. But anyway, played in a couple of those bands for about 2.5 years and lived that kind of touring country band, cover band life. But I was writing the whole time. And eventually I was like, man, it was kind of just a big exercise in procrastination, because I knew I wanted to end up here because all my heroes, my songwriting heroes, were here. So I was growing up, I was a huge, started earlier. I know you didn't ask this, but started earlier with like my parents' record collection. So Creedence Clearwater Revival, the Eagles, the Kinks, the Beatles, and there was some country in there, like Johnny Horton, Johnny Cash, Dolly Parton. But anyway, eventually in high school, I found Steve Earle, and Steve was kind of the Copperhead Road record was really like my doorway through which I walked into country music. Because he was kind of at that intersection of, and in Canada where I grew up, they played it on rock radio, which was what we listened to all the time. So, but to me, Steve, especially on that album, it was this beautiful intersection of like, kind of vivid, colorful lyrics with like rock melodies and rock grooves and this hard edge to it, and that really kind of appealed to me. And so that's kind of what made me get into writing, and I knew that they actually didn't cut that record here; they cut it in Memphis. But I knew that most of the country I was listening to
was coming from
in the
here.
bar band days was coming from here, and also this was in the days when, I mean, this was early 90s, so Garth had exploded, Alan Jackson, that whole class of 89, those were all the songs we were playing in the bars, and I'm 21, 22 years old, and we're playing all these songs, and they would, in between our sets, they would have video screens in all these big country clubs, and so they would play CMT, and you would always see okay, Church on Cumberland Road, Bob DiPiero. You'd see the writer.
Yeah.
And so I got used to seeing all these writer names on all these songs. And so when I moved here, I already knew all these names. And but anyway, I had kind of made the connection that this was where all those songs were written, and I wanted to come here and learn from the best.
Be a part of it.
Yeah.
So when you moved here, how did it go initially?
There was a guy back in Canada who was a friend of a friend who had spent some time here, and I said, because I didn't even know where to start.
Yeah.
I didn't really know anybody. I had been to Canadian Country Music Week, which was in Hamilton, Ontario that year, 6 months before I moved here, and I had met a handful of people, a few of which lived here, but no one that I would really was a friend that I could call and crash on their couch or anything. So it really felt like starting from nothing,
Yeah.
But anyway, this buddy of mine in London said, when you go, London, Ontario, when you go to Nashville, there's a free paper called the Nashville Scene. It's in every grocery store, every gas station. Get it, flip to the back, you'll see all these writers' nights. Just start hanging out there. And literally that was it.
Wow.
That was the only that was my sole instruction.
That probably saved you like 6 months though. At least kind of knowing maybe where to go.
It saved me wandering Music Row with a guitar in my hand and just cold calling publishing companies. So I got that paper, and I rented a room in a house in East Nashville and got that paper, and I just made going out my job.
Yeah.
And so I would write during the day all by myself because I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And I would go out to the Bluebird, Douglas Corner, Broken Spoke, Courtyard Cafe in Antioch. There's a place off Nolensville, the Boardwalk Cafe. And a lot of people that, I wouldn't say a lot of people that I know now that are in my circle were from those days, but a bunch of them, like Tony Lane, Dave Turnbull, David Lee, Chris Wallen. I mean, a lot of those guys were kind of in that same kind of group.
Yeah, that was your class-ish.
A little bit, yeah. So just started going there, and that was, it's how you start to network and eventually begin co-writing and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And also a big part of my early experience was going to rounds that I wasn't playing on, like going to Douglas Corner and seeing, DiPiero play, going to the Bluebird and seeing Jim Photoglow do Fishing in the Dark. And, those, and it's like, those are those moments where you go, oh man, I'm so close,
and so far,
but you really, to me, and I think this happens to everybody. The level of your game either comes up, or you just go home.
Yeah, I think when you witness that, I feel like I might have just talked about this, but when you do witness, when you find out where the bar is, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But also there's a part of you that goes, I think I could do it.
Yeah.
Like I think if I work hard and take a lot, and I got to get lucky, but I think I can get there.
Yeah.
And it's like leaving a concert and going home to like practice guitar because you're so inspired.
Oh, totally.
My
writes the next day after I just saw a show at the Bluebird would always be affected by that. And because you're wanting to, now it's like you have a target that you know where it is now anyway. You kind of think you know where it is, and so you try and write toward that. I had a big gift too when I moved to town, because I went to the Bluebird one night and Don Schlitz was playing.
Yeah.
And for those listeners who don't know, I mean, Don, wrote Forever and Ever Amen for Randy Travis, Deeper Than the Holler on the other hand. He Thinks He'll Keep Her for Mary Chapin Carpenter. Songs for Reba and Tanya Tucker and Garth Brooks, and Learning to Live Again Is Killing Me.
Yeah.
Just tons and tons of songs. Anyway, I had gone to the Bluebird not to play, but to watch him. And after, I was sitting at the bar and I was like, man, I'm really tired. I just want to go home. But I thought, I'm going to go up and at least shake Don's hand. And so I went up to him and we had a brief conversation, and like 30 seconds. And then he had to go rescue his wife from some drunk guy, I think. And anyway, you know how the Bluebird is. In those days, the band would stop, or the act would stop. So it would take a while to empty out. And so I was down to I was the last 2 or 3 people in the place, and I thought, okay, I'm really going now. So I walk up to Don and say, hey, man, good to meet you. He said, man, it's Deric, right? I said, yeah. He said, from Ontario. I said, yeah. I said, so do you write commercial music? And I said, I guess so. And, well, who do you listen to? And I named some of the. He said, would you bring a cassette by my office? Wow. And I said, yeah. And I was just on cloud 9. And just some of the things he said to me that night it just made me feel like welcome to town.
Yeah.
From a guy who'd done it on this just masterful world-class level. And that gave me just a kind of a belief in myself that, I mean, if he thinks I belong here just because of something he saw in me,
yeah,
maybe I do.
Yeah, you could smell it on you or something.
It was because he hadn't heard any of my music.
Yeah,
but he just was kind of taking a chance, and so anyway, wow. Yeah, it was weird, but there were a couple of little moments like that where I met people who just were very encouraging and kind of gave me that gift of hey man, you probably belong here. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did it kind of evolve into your first publishing deal and record deal and all that stuff?
So it's got a Don Schlitz connection here too. So Don invited me to send stuff to his publishing company, and so I started having breakfast 2 or 3 times a year with his song plugger at his company. That led to me writing with someone at his company, and I was writing with this guy over there. Don had a company with Chuck Flood called Hayes Street Music,
yeah,
and so I was writing over there with this guy, and his name was Kevin, and so we were writing. We didn't even finish our song that day, but got to the end of the day, and he said, "Man, I'm doing a gig over here at the Sutler later. If you want to come and check it out." And I said, "Sure." So the answer in those days was always yes, to anything, So I went over there, and I was sitting there, and in the door comes his song plugger from Hayes Street, Scott, and Scott had a girl on his arm. And her name was Christy Crutchfield, and her dad was Jerry Crutchfield, and Jerry ran MCA Publishing for years. He produced Lee Greenwood, Tanya Tucker, and Jerry was starting a new publishing company, and so Scott from Hayes Street introduced me to Christy, and anyway, Christy over the course of the evening said, "Hey, we're looking for people to sign. Would you drop some music off?" And so I dropped some stuff off, and about 2 days later, they called and wanted to meet. After the meeting, they said, "Yeah, we want to offer you a publishing deal." And I'd been in town, I guess, about 1.5 years.
Yeah.
At that point, yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just wild how it all.
I know.
Kind of like it.
Yeah.
It would never make sense, right?
No.
It only makes sense looking back.
It does, and if I hadn't gone and taken that step of going up to Dawn and saying, "Hey, man, introducing myself," it never would have led to that connection, which never would have led to meeting her. And yeah, so I wrote. I know you didn't ask this, but I wrote there for 2 years.
Okay,
and it was wonderful. I got $12,000 a year.
Yep.
To write, and had no cuts, but I had an office that was mine, literally my own room.
Oh wow.
And it had AC, and we didn't have AC in the rented farmhouse that my then girlfriend, now wife, and I were renting with my 5 stepkids. Did I bring that up? No. I haven't mentioned that yet. Yeah, so at this point, I'm 25 years old, and I've got a wife and 5 stepkids.
Wow.
And just trying to figure it out. And yeah, so I wrote there for 2 years, got no cuts. Got dropped, thought, I've made a terrible mistake because I have no other marketable skills. And so I just, I did little things. My wife is a songwriter from South Carolina, and she's also a songwriter while she moved here.
Yeah.
But she painted houses as a day gig. So she and I would paint, and then I'd had another friend that would help move furniture and kind of blue collar jobs. And then eventually got another deal at Sony this time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And it didn't. How long did it take? And how long were you sweating
The second day, I was sweating it about 2 years.
Okay.
Well, maybe another year and a half. Year and a half, 2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sweating it with a family this time, that's a different type of sweating it.
It's a different level of stress.
It's a different level, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and then at some point, you start to sort of get noticed as like an artist as well as a songwriter.
Yeah. So how that happened was, I had one of my early acquaintances in town that I met through some Canadian artist friends of mine was a guy named Steve Bogart.
Yeah.
And Steve Steve's brilliant man, dear friend. He was, speaking of visas, he was my sponsor for my my visa and my green card.
Gotcha.
But he's been a friend. When my wife and I didn't have two nickels to rub together, and Steve and his wife Beverly knew that we had all these kids at home, and they'd do things like invite us over for 4th of July, and our kids would swim in his pool and stuff. And afterwards, he'd have to clean the pool. No, I'm just kidding. But so Steve had been a friend and someone I would keep up with every few months. And after I lost that first pub deal, I just kind of I started. I don't know, man. Long story, but I had a friend who had done some acting here in town, and acting was kind of what I was going to do before I picked up a guitar. I mean, I was a little kid, right? And then 12, 13, 14, music took over. But this friend of mine was in some commercials and a couple of TV movies that were cast out in Nashville. And I was like, man, I've got no money. I think I can do that.
Yeah.
So her agent became my agent, and I got cast in some things, and a few of them paid pretty well. So all of a sudden, I'm getting money in the mailbox from something that Music Row has zero control over. And there was an empowerment to that, where I felt like, wow, I've got a skill that, is not dictated by what anyone on Music Row thinks. And so that kind of had an effect on my writing, I think. And this is something that, I only realized looking back, but I started to write a little differently, and I started singing different. And at some point, I sent Steve 2 songs, and he called me back and he said, man, you're doing something different with your voice you didn't used to do, and these songs are really good. What are you doing for publishing right now? And I said, well, I'm not doing anything. And he said, well, my son-in-law, well, he wasn't his son-in-law yet, but he said, my son-in-law is just started in the tape room at Sony Publishing. Yeah. And he actually, that's not true. He had been in the tape room, but he had just gotten a promotion to full-time plugger.
Gotcha.
And his name is Arturo Buenahora.
Wow.
And I think he'd love to meet with you. So I went and met with Arturo, and he signed me. And so that was my second pub deal, and that would have been December of 1999. And so we sign, and we do a demo session, and Steve produces this demo session. And so the very first demo session I did downstairs at Sony, did two songs on that session. He took and he played for Randy Goodman and Doug Howard when they were at Lyric Street Records, which Lyric Street had Rascal Flatts, She Daisy. Yeah. This is like 2000, summer 2000. And based on that demo session that Steve produced, Doug and Randy offered me a record deal. And so all of a sudden I've got a record deal and working on a record, and also writing with other people that Arturo was signing, like this new guy named Dierks Bentley that they just signed. Yeah. So which those kind of that all kind of happened at the same time. So
yeah, well, and this was sort of one of the things that I realized just sort of looking things up today was that, like, essentially your first big hit as a songwriter is happening at the same time that you're starting your artist career. Yeah. So that had to be like, it's definitely amazing, but also perhaps disorienting.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot at once, and kind of like, you know, the music business, it's feast or famine, right? And this was after years of nothing, and all of a sudden, boom, you got a record deal, and then the thing with Dierks, I met after Arturo signed me to my pub deal, he signed about 6 months later. He signed Dierks, and then about I want to say a year later, he signed Eric Church. And a little bit later, he signed Taylor Swift.
Wow. Pretty good run.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, and I say to him now when I see him around town, I'm like, hey bud, 3 out of 4 ain't bad, you know? So we were all kind of in the mix writing together. So I was writing with Taylor, I was writing with Dierks, writing with Eric. Taylor never recorded anything we wrote, but Eric and Dierks did, you know? Yeah. But anyway, so Dierks and I were writing with Brett Beavers, who ended up producing the first Dierks records. And I mean, I should say they were writing all the time. And every once in a while, they'd loop in me or Jim Beavers or Tony Martin or Steve Bogard, these guys. And we ended up writing my first cut was actually a Canadian artist. My second cut was a Dierks Bentley song called Distant Shore that helped to get him his record deal with Capitol, and he played it at his showcase when he was showcasing for labels. And that was on the first round of stuff they cut, which Brett produced. And then we wrote What Was I Thinkin, which was his first single as an artist, and all 3 of our first singles as writers. Wow. Brett's first as a producer. It was first for everybody. And so that was a big moment, and that was going on at the same time as my artist stuff was going on.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah,
that's. I'd like to paint a little picture for you.
Please.
It's like 2004, maybe 2005. My sister's a few years older. Yeah, she'd drive me to school in her white Volkswagen Passat.
Nice.
She controlled the radio, you know. And I'll never forget, we were driving to school one day and she turns on the radio and it's like, ba-da-da, what was that? And I was like, what is this? It's just a young tyke.
Really?
Yeah, and
Thanks, man.
that really that is one of the first country songs I can ever remember that I was like, I got to check this stuff. Like, what is this? This is great.
Thank you.
So it really had a big effect on my life.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to be sitting here with you now.
Yeah, well, thanks.
What was that like getting you get a number 1 song. This is like a rocket ship that you're on, and you're also, doing your own stuff.
Yeah, well, that was interesting because. I mean, Dierks and I both did radio tours at the same time. Wow. And we were both on, labels, different labels at the same time. And I even made my record like a year, because I made my record really quick. So we signed in 2000 to Lyric Street. I made that record. But then they kind of sat on it for, about a year and a half.
As they do.
Which should have been an indication to me that something was afoot.
Yeah, been there.
Yes, yeah. But Dierks, he signed his deal later and made a record at like a normal pace, and then our songs came out at the same time. And I was, on one hand, it's like I was elated because I'd been in town 8-9 years at this point.
Yeah.
10-year town. Yeah. And I was watching his just take off like a rocket, and mine so his is over here and mine's over here, and so you're, and I'm going out to radio working this one and just watching this one go through the roof. So it was. I mean, I wouldn't say that watching my own single top out at 40 diminished the joy I felt for the other one. It definitely didn't. But it was there were a lot of mixed emotions at the Ruttan household back in those days.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things to understand or describe to people. And eventually I feel like you do find your own, you wrap your mind around it, make your peace with it. But
yeah,
it's an interesting ride when, in this case you're a part of it. So you're hugely, it's benefiting you big time. But, as you go and people's careers start to take off, or you're in a similar position as somebody else, and then they got one song that works, and all of a sudden a few years go by and they're, for me, like I've got friends that are like basically playing stadiums at this point, and I'm like, dang, this is crazy, but it's just part of the journey.
It is, and it's it's something that we all have to do, really, in any job. I think our job, it gets kind of illustrated on huge billboards and and in stadiums and stuff. But I think everybody goes through that to one degree or another in life. And I think it's just, what I learned was you've got to kind of just focus on the work, and enjoy the work, and stop being. And it's hard to do. It's taken me a long time to be able to do it, and honestly, I still don't do it 100%. It's a work in progress. But this idea of not finding your value in the result, and just loving the work that you do, and at the end of the day, having your goal. I want to go home. I want to play this song for my wife. That's it. Yeah. I just want her to like it, honestly.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'm going to move on to the next song, and So there was some of that, but also it really, I was able to, because if my artist career had taken off at that level, it's the what ifs. Like, you just don't know what would have happened. And I was able to write some really cool songs being in town, and have relationships with people that, I might not have if I was focusing on that other thing.
Yeah.
And I think my family benefited from that too, from me being around more.
No doubt.
And I really think that all that stuff works out.
You've gone on to have an incredibly successful career as a
thank you, Troy.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you've written a lot of my favorite songs. So,
oh goodness,
I'm not just blowing smoke,
Okay. Nice.
So I don't know. Keep going. Keep unfurling the story. What starts to happen next?
Oh gosh, what happens next? Well, can I rewind a little bit,
please?
Because you mentioned What Was I Thinkin?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how we wrote that.
Please. Yeah.
Because we've never talked about that. But so, as I mentioned, I had one song on that batch that they had cut. And so there was one song called Distant Shore. And then me wanting to make the most of my time with Brett, we had a write coming up. And I said, hey, man, what do you guys need for Dierks? Like, I was trying to be kind of targeted about it.
Yeah.
Because I never, as a writer, want to spend time writing something they already have.
Sure.
Because they already have it. Now, you might beat it, but it just seems like you increase your chances of getting a cut if it's something that they don't have. And so he said, well, it had been suggested by, I think, somebody at the label, that while they had a lot of up-tempo stuff, it was more like mid-tempo. They didn't have a real kind of quick, fast-paced shotgun lyric kind of song. And so I was messing around on my guitar at home, and I came up with the kind of the chord progression that's in the intro, turnaround, outro.
Gotcha.
And at the end of the chorus, that down, that whole deal.
Yeah.
And so I brought that in and played it for Brett, and he said, man, I love that. Let's work on that. So we didn't have a title. We didn't have an idea. It was literally us at room 3 at the fire hall, the Sony publishing fire hall, just kind of, chipping away at it, man. Just grinding on it.
Can be a dangerous place when you're writing a song around a riff.
I know, and I almost never do that anymore. It's kind of funny that's probably my biggest song in my catalog, and it started that way. But
wow.
But the kind of the title fell out in the room, and it came out of his mouth, not mine. And all of a sudden, we're writing this story, and then he went and played it for Dierks, and Dierks initially was a little. And I think he'd say this if he were sitting here. He was a little hesitant, I think, to jump on it. I think he felt like it was a little silly, which it is. But Brett convinced him to finish it with us, and we got back together and wrote it, and that song never even got demoed. It went from like cassette, just in the room,
Wow,
voice memo style, to I think maybe a month and a half later they cut the master to that.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that was quick turnaround, and then
it was. And speaking of 10-Year Town, that song went #1 9 years to the week that I moved to Nashville.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, and then how did it it seemed, I wasn't super conscious of what was going on in the charts at the time, but did it kind of fly up there? Did it take a while?
Yeah. No, that song flew up the charts. It was very quick.
Yeah.
And it was kind of cool. My wife, as I mentioned, Margaret, she's a songwriter, and she Cliff Aldrich is a friend of hers, and she had a meeting with Cliff one day, and after What Was I Thinkin, it had been a hit, and Cliff said to my wife, he said, "So ask Deric when you get home what it feels like to have written one of those songs that now everyone in town wants to get one of." Because after that song came out, I mean, it was so different at the time because people forget, but the early 2000s, Brett Beavers and I actually did a thing for Bart Herbison for the Tennessean, a story behind the song on this song. And Brett said this, I didn't say this, but I had kind of forgotten, but the early 2000s we were kind of catering in country music to like soccer moms.
Yeah.
It was a lot of softer kind of music, things that weren't offensive, and Dierks, I mean, when he came out, it was a little dangerous. I mean, it was a little, well, a lot edgier than what was on the radio at the time.
Yeah.
So I think, it was a time when Music Row then wanted some of that.
And wanted the edge.
I guess, yeah. And so that was kind of cool to have written one of those songs that had a little moment like that.
Yeah. Were you kind of expected to repeat that trick again, or?
Well, we sure tried.
Yeah.
We sure tried,
yeah,
Troy.
how many?
All three of us tried.
Yeah. Well, it was a lucrative combo. The three of y'all.
It was. Yeah.
And you had some success again.
Yeah. So
I was curious. Yeah. How many times did you try again?
I mean, with the what you realize very quickly when you're trying to repeat something as specific as What Was I Thinkin? It's like, it's kind of a, we weren't trying to emulate anything when we wrote that. We were just trying to write, the best thing. Now we had a template as far as let's make a quick song.
Tempo, yeah.
Yeah, but it's so hard to recreate something like that. And why would you want to, too? It's kind of like just move on to the next thing, which with the next Dierks single I had, we kind of did that, which was A Lot of Leaving Left to Do, which was the first single off his Modern Day Drifter record. And that song was kind of the same mindset where we had gone out on a bus. Sony had leased us a bus, which we then recouped. That's another podcast. But they had got us a bus, and Brett and I went out to meet Dierks on the road because he had kind of made it his mission statement that he was going to tour more than anyone else in country music. And so he was always gone.
Yeah.
And so Brett and I are on this bus driving up to, I think it was somewhere in Ohio, to meet him and write with him for a few days. And they'd already written the bulk of the record. So I'm like a come in on the second half of the record guy, apparently. I'm just realizing this now. But don't put me in too early, coach. But so
You're
we're on
clutch time.
I know. So Brett and I are on this bus, and I said, "So man, play me some of the stuff that you've got for the second record." And so he sat there. We're in the lounge in the bus, and he's got his guitar, and he plays me "Come a Little Closer." Come a little closer, baby. Feel like laying you down, Yeah. And then he plays me Settle for a Slow Down. And I'm like, man, these are some great songs. Like, I've really got to rise to the occasion on this. So I knew those kind of bases were covered. And we got up to Ohio, and we got there. I think we didn't have time to write that first day, but we're standing side stage. watching Dierks play, and he always used to do. It was a Waylon Jennings song called "Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way?"
Yeah,
and he used to do that in all of his shows, at least that particular tour. And I said to Brett, I said, "Man, he needs something like this, and something with that 4 on the floor kind of thing." And so the next day, I had a lot of leaving left to do, written down in my computer as a title, and we just kind of put it with that groove and started hammering on it, and we were done in about 2.5 hours, and it was one of the last songs they recorded. We actually wrote 2 songs on that trip. There was that, and then there was a ballad called "I'm Gonna Get There Someday." That was the last song on that album, so I had like bookends on that record.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how that one happened.
It's a big song again.
Yeah, that one we got to number 2 on, so it wasn't quite a number 1. It was number 2.
That's interesting though, because there's certain songs that don't go number 1 but are still.
Oh yeah.
Like I would have never known that until you just said it.
Well,
but
and
it's
our
still relevant today.
Yeah, and our genre is one of the only genres, or if not the only genre, that tends to get caught up in that. Like in rock and pop, they don't seem to put as much value on, oh, that was a number 1. Was it not? Was it? And I think it's, there's so many songs in history that weren't number 1 songs.
Yeah.
Like "Take It Easy" by the Eagles, I think got to like 9 or something on the chart.
It's doing all right.
It's doing okay.
Yeah.
Creedence Clearwater Revival, one of my favorite bands, never had a number 1 song.
Wow.
But, you could play their hits all day long and you know every one of them. So it's number 1s are something that we kind of attach to. Nowadays, I would love another number 1, obviously, but I kind of I stole this line from my buddy Jonathan Singleton, that a number 2 is probably preferable to a number 1 because you don't have to have a party, you don't have to park your truck downtown, you don't have to pay $20, you don't have to talk, but the money's the same. So
yeah. So that's pretty funny.
That said, I'll still take the number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that you said earlier that I thought maybe unpack that for me a little bit is when you were talking about writing songs, and when you came here, maybe you were writing a certain way, and then when you kind of stopped doing it as much, and you've kind of did this acting stuff over here or whatever, when you came back to it, you were writing differently, and then you're this early success that you were having with Dierks was like sort of by writing differently. How does that? How do you conceptualize that?
Man, well, I think the stuff that got Steve Bogart's attention back in the day and got Lyric Street's attention, some of those were 100%ers that I had written. And I think what it comes down to for me is there's a certain type of song that I write that is just for me. And it's almost always 100%er. And it's me sitting at home. And it could be a made-up story. It could be something that happened. But it's a song that's just for me, and I find that when I do those, they tend to be on the slower side, and they tend to have a lot of. I love, color and people call it furniture, whatever, just vivid kind of pictures. The same thing that drew me to Steve Earle back when I was in high school. It's the same thing that I try and put into my songs. And I've done that with a lot of songs. I tend to I try anyway. The stuff that excites me is very visual lyrics. Like when you hear a verse, you go, oh yeah, I can picture. It's almost like
a little movie.
It's like a little movie. And I love songs that do that. And I love it when my songs do that. So when I kind of was writing by myself that little period of time and kind of turned a corner, got the attention of Steve, eventually landed my first deal at Sony. I'm there again, by the way, the second time. That's another one. But a lot of that was just because I was trying to please myself and not really think, well, what would Music Row like? What would this artist want to say? What would this artist want to say? It was like, what would I want to say? And that's kind of when the writing kind of took a took a turn for the better.
And did that help you? Do you think that mindset just helped you, like when you were getting back in rooms and not writing by yourself?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely helped to kind of define my writer voice.
Yeah.
To the degree that it can be kind of a unique voice, because I mean, doing this for a living, it's interesting because you want to be one of those writers that people go, oh, that's a such and such song, but like Tony Lane's got a very specific thing that Tony does, one of my oldest friends in town, but it's a very specific thing.
Yeah.
And then you've got somebody like Ashley Gorley, who is like a chameleon, who can go stone country if you want him to, or super pop if you want him to.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm kind of somewhere in the middle of that. I think that I am able to shift a lot in rooms where I could go very country. I kind of default that way, a little more country than pop, but I can go pop too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I think it's important for writers who do this for a job on Music Row to take time out, block out time to write by themselves, rediscover that voice, because if nothing else, it'll be very inspirational to you. If you're in one of those ruts where you're like, man, I haven't had a good idea in a month, and we all have that.
Sure.
Everyone has that. Or I haven't written a song that I truly love in 3 months. Block out some time and go and just get back to why you fell in love with it in the first place, which was that kid in his room in high school, just with a guitar and rediscovering, wow, I just did this thing. And that, at least with me, that always re-excites me about driving into work every day.
Does it ever matter, like, if anything actually happens with the song? Is it just the act of doing it that is?
I don't think it does matter.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love for them all to get cut, obviously, but I mean, a good example of what I'm talking about is I have a song that I wrote, 100%. It's called Main Street 1979. And no one's recorded it. I recorded it actually on a record.
Yeah.
So, and I've done, I guess, since the Lyric Street record, that kind of enabled me to make 5 more records that I own the masters of and continued to tour on in Canada. And that's kind of another, split personality part of what I do.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wrote this song, Main Street 1979, after a trip home to my hometown and just driving down Main Street and the flood of memories that come to you, and you contrast that with where you are in your life now, and you go home and pick up a guitar and hit a D chord, and you just start talking about what you saw.
Yeah.
And that song is one of my favorites because it talks about my dad and my grandfather, both of whom are not here anymore, and that's one that I would love for Tim McGraw to record. I'd love for Chesney to record it, but if they don't, that's fine too. Because I recorded it, and I love my recording of it.
Yeah.
And the act of writing that song kind of gave me life in my songwriter soul, to go out and venture forth and write more songs, on Music Row.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's what you're describing is very, very insightful. I think a lot of people are going to take a lot of. There's a lot of good nuggets in there.
I hope so.
Because, I think I can speak only from my own personal experience, right? But I write, especially in the last year, I write a lot of songs by myself. Mm-hmm. And you go, well, what am I going to do with these?
Right.
This song is like a little too weird. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a little too left of center for somebody, to cut. Mm-hmm. But I can cut it. So
totally.
there's an option. Or in some way that I can't measure, I walked into a room 2 days later with that little spark back in my soul.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now I'm a better writer in whatever way I need to be.
Right. And I think what you just touched on there is confidence.
Yeah. Which is huge.
It's just huge. And what we do for a living, man, it is so ethereal, and we make it up and we don't even know how it really happens. We don't know where it comes from. Some of us pretend we do, we don't. Yeah. And so it's easy, and it's all like, okay, walk into a room with two strangers, cut your chest open, throw your heart on the table. There it is. They do the same. I mean, everything is out there. And so it can be deflating when people don't get what you do.
Yeah, it hurts.
It hurts, and it hurts your confidence. And this whole songwriting game is all a mind game anyway. It's a mind and heart game. Yeah. And so when you get deflated, you need to get your confidence back. And for me, one of the tools to do that is lock yourself away and write a few killer 100%ers. Whether anyone cuts them or not doesn't matter. It's that you can do it, man.
Yeah, and you did it, and that you get to, you just, like you said earlier, all you can control is doing the work.
Yeah.
That's it. We don't get, the rest of it is just out there.
It is one of those jobs that you have so little control over the end result that it's laughable to people who do other things for a living. Yeah. And you just have to kind of make peace with that, and all you can control. And this is I've had to learn this very slowly over the long haul, and I'm still learning it. Okay.
Yeah.
So but I'm kind of talking to myself when I say this, but you've just got to, like I said earlier, not tie your happiness to what happens to this song, or not tie your sense of self-worth or your value to what happens to this song, because you've just got to, if you can fall in love with the work and love what you did and go, you know what, my co-writer loves this, I love this, we're not idiots, our wives love it, that's all you can do. And because for that song to get on the radio, your publisher has to pitch it. If it gets shot down, they have to pitch it again, which happens a lot. And then there's a committee at a record label that has to like it usually. Yeah. Then then it gets to the artist, and then the producer's going to have his 2 cents. The artist's wife is going to have 2 cents. Management's going to have 2 cents, and then and then they go into the studio. Maybe the recording's awesome. Maybe they miss it. I've had songs that have died a horrible death that way too.
Yep.
Where it's the biggest act in the land, they take it in, they cut it, and they're like, man, we love this, we tried it twice, I'm not loving how I sound on it. Yeah. And you're going, but my wife wants a new pool, so I guess that ain't happening. So it's all this up and down. So, there's so much beyond your control, you just can't tie your value up in it, or you'll go crazy.
You go insane.
You go insane.
And that's the whole thing. I think that part of it, wondering what other people think, what Music Row thinks, that part of it can just become so corrosive on your soul. Mm-hmm. And that you have to find a way, as much as you can, to turn it off and just go out there and, listen, this is a battle I'm fighting every day. And I'm not sure I'm winning, but I'm trying.
Well, just know that all of us have either are there or have been there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And look, it's a crazy thing we do, and people don't, I go out and play a lot of these corporate gigs, and I'll I can sit up there and I can go 7 or 8 songs deep, and people are like, "Oh yeah, I've heard all those on the radio."
Yep.
And I often tell people, what you're hearing is the top 1 or 2% of my catalog, because they don't get that 98% of what we do, no one ever hears.
Yeah. Maybe more.
Or more. And in what other job is that a thing?
Right.
That's not really that does not look like a viable business on paper. Yeah. But you just have to, it's just, when it hits big, it hits big.
And that's the payoff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just on a annual guys trip, and you know, I tell some version of the story every time it happens, but they're like, well, how's it going? And I'm like, dude, I mean, good, but the hard part is you do 100 things every year and 1 or 2 of them matter. Yeah. And you don't know which 2. So you got to do them all.
And it's often not the 2 that you thought were going to matter, which is another mind trip, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, before we get out of here, I feel like you have given so much wonderful advice that is quite tactical. But what are you? I don't know. Like what's next? What's something that is currently exciting you, or that you're excited about on the horizon?
Spring. I'm excited for spring. Some warmer weather. I'm super stoked about that.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know. Just driving into town every day, the thought in my head is always like, I could write the best song of my life today. You could do that. And that's it's the unknown that keeps me going. So I'm excited about I would just generally, this is sounding super hippie trippy, but I'm just kind of excited about possibility.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's amazing.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it out there, and there's a whole lot that can go right.
Yeah.
For us. And you just got to chase it down. But you got to show up. And like you said earlier, you've got to go through all the bad ones to get to the good ones. And I'm excited about that. And spring.
It's pretty good answer.
I mentioned spring.
You did mention spring.
Okay, good.
And we had a taste of it today.
Yes, we did have a taste of it today.
A little bit.
It warmed up a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for asking me.
One of my favorite ones we've done. So
wow. Well,
thank you. And I specifically, it's because I think sometimes you get bogged down in like, what's the story behind this song? What's the story behind this song? But like, I love talking about like the intangible. Mm-hmm. What is it? What is the soul of a songwriter? Like, what is this thing that we're trying to chase? And we got to do a lot of that today, so it was pretty fun.
Well, thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, thank you. All right, guys. That's it. That's the pod. See you later. Hey, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to submit a question for one of our Q&A episodes, you can do so at tenuretowne.com. We would love it if you would join the Tenure Town community, which just means we'll send you updates via email about stuff we got going on. And of course, please rate and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Wherever you listen or watch this thing, we appreciate you so much. See you next week.